Well, package arrived yesterday. It's my wheel assembly, and it's a Tisco BH215 is what it is. So I ordered it from an online tractor supply company, and it was drop shipped probably directly from a Tisco warehouse. So I started to open it up and unpack it, and then I decided to grab the videotape when I saw what was inside because I thought it would be kind of funny to see. To their credit, they only charged me about $16 to ship this thing, and considering the weight, I don't know how they figured that, but I can't ship anything anywhere in the country this heavy for $16. That's for sure. Even though it came, I think it was UPS ground, but turns out what they sold me is supposed to be the wheel assembly. They have a picture of it all assembled. Turns out all they do is they throw all the separate components in the box and ship it to you for assembly by you. They don't do a very good job of packing it. So this was just kind of loose sitting in here and slapping around. You can see the what used to be paint, I guess, on the bolt heads is scraped off there. But I mean, they don't even assemble the hub. Bearings. I'll give you a couple of Timken bearings to fit it. What do we got here? We got some big spacers, 2 seals. There's the axle nut. And there's the bearings. So I'm gonna have to put the bearings in and install the seals. And then here's the bolt, which they sell separately. So they just take all the components they normally sell separately and throw them in. So you can buy the wheel separately, the hub separately, the bearings separately, and the seals separately. And here's the big old axle bolt. So this is the thing that I'm really curious about to see, is whether or not this is going to be a good fit for my original fork. Because if it's not, well, then it's pretty much going to be a problem. Okay, my head cold's feeling a little better, so I decided to come down basement tonight and work on my improvised chain guard for the brush hog. And I'm back with a piece of angle iron. What I've done is I've clamped a piece of sacrificial wood down to the drill press table, and I drilled, I'm using this drill bit for a pilot hole right now. This is not going to be my finished product, but I'm drilling pilot holes first. And I've drilled one hole, and I slid the angle iron down to where I want my spacing to be. And then I drove a finish nail in at this position. And what that's going to do for me now is I drill my second hole. And now if I pick up, I'm going to put the camera down, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to slide down and put this hole over my finish nail and drill the next hole and continue that process all the way down until I reach one end. And what I'm going to end up with is I'm going to end up with a nice evenly spaced set of holes. Okay, now I got all my holes, pilot holes drilled, and they're all evenly spaced. And now I'm going to use a larger bit to enlarge the hole. Now I decided on these size holes because I picked up a whole box of these S-hooks. And what I'm going to do is use these S-hooks. I'm going to install the S-hooks through the holes here, bend them over, and oops. And then once I get the S-hooks all in there, bent over, I'll put a length of chain on there and bend that over, and that'll be my way of attaching the chain lengths to my guard. So now I got my pilot hole test, got this hole tested, so now I can go back and count and bore all those other ones. Alright, now all my holes are drilled. Now's the monotonous step of crimping down all of these S-hooks. So I'm just doing that on the back of my vise. My big bench vise here has a flat spot, kind of acts like a little anvil. Alright, I got all my hooks installed. I was going to bolt the bracket on the front so I can get an idea how long I need to cut the chains. So I'm going to unhook it from the tractor to do that. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to see if my machinist neighbor can take care of this problem for me. This is where the bearing's supposed to ride, so I'm going to take this off and see if he can put it in his lathe and maybe clean that up some. So I'm thinking I could take this bolt out, which is probably pretty rusted, and slide this off of that spline shaft, but that's probably also pretty rusted on there. And even if I do that, then when he puts this in his lathe, he's still going to have this to deal with. So I think the easier way to do it, or the better way to do it, would be to take this clip out and knock this U-joint out of here. And then that way he can just put this half of the assembly in his lathe and maybe clean that up. Well, it's just great. The clip just broke from old age. Okay, clip on the other side also broke, and they're seized in there pretty well. So I'm going to need to press them out. So I'm going to have to take this assembly off of here. Anyways, so I'm going to put some penetrating oil on this nut and bolt and see if that helps get that off. Okay, removing the bolt wasn't that difficult with a little bit of penetrating oil, but this is now stuck on the spline shaft. So I'm going to try and use this chisel and as a wedge, drive this chisel in and see if that pops it loose. I'm going to try doing that on both sides. Hopefully that'll do it. Well, it's slow going, but it is coming off. Okay, I just used some gunk engine degreaser and cleaned off this old grease. First I started with a razor blade in my razor blade scraper here and got the heavy stuff off, and then I used the degreaser and I cleaned that all off so that now I can handle this without having to have gloves on constantly, which is going to be helpful when I go to put this in the press downstairs and press out that U-joint. Okay, I gotta get this set up in my press just right, so I'm gonna find something so I can shim this end up a little bit, try and keep that nice and square, and then I've got to find something I can insert down in here that my press can actually push on to push that out. I just grabbed a large nut and stick that in there. Hopefully this doesn't take too much pressure to push these out. Okay, I popped it free with the nut in there, and now the nut was basically at the end of its travel, so I gotta come up with the other plan, which I just dropped the whole lower shelf of the press down, and now I can use my I use this for pressing a lot of stuff out. This is actually an end of an outer CV joint for a ATV, which I had to replace, and it works out really well because it fits kind of like over this end here, and it's a good thing for doing this kind of work. Here's what it looks like when I got it all rigged the way I want it. Cleaned off some more of the grease so you can see how this basically works. What happens is as you push down on this, eventually this arm, the cross part of the U-joint here will bottom out against this. So you can only get this to come out that far. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the whole unit over, and I'm going to press on just this part, which is going to be a little trickier, but I'm going to push down on this part of the arm. What that's going to do is that's going to drive this back in, but it's going to back out of this cup over on this side. And if I push it down far enough, I should be able to then pull up out of that cup and release the whole U-joint from the two cups. So here's what I set up. So now as I push down on this arm, it's pushing down that cup back into the yoke, and this one's not moving, which means the pin is pulling out, the end of that's pulling out. So you can actually see that happening as I pull it down. You can see this is dropping out, but this isn't moving, which is what I want. I was able to grab this cup that was sticking about halfway out with channel locks and pop it out. We've got the seal here, and now let's see if I can't pop that whole thing out. Oh, I forgot. I've got to set this up and push this back, that other cup back about halfway out, and then I'll be able to lift up and pop the whole thing out. So this is my setup now, and I'm pushing this back down. Okay, so now this is bottomed out again, so that's as far as I can go, but now I should be able to pop this out. And now I got this separated, so now I can clean some more of that grease off of there, and hopefully my neighbor will be able to put this in the lathe and clean that up. If not, then we're going to grind this weld off to save the shaft and replace this whole yoke. Okay, the good news is my neighbor was able to put this in his 4-jaw chuck on his lathe and was able to file this, and now it's nice and smooth, so it'll be a good surface for the bearing. And I haven't tried it yet, but if it's a little bit undersized now, I'll use the smaller bearing that came in that kit and see how that fits. But I think that's going to work great. And now the only problem is I need to put this back together, but when I had it apart, I cleaned it up, I saw that these little rubber boots that act as seals on the two on here are good, but one of the two on the other half here is completely ripped. That one is not. That one looks like that one's torn also. So anyways, I don't want to reuse those, and I wasn't able to find any listing for those being sold separately. Could get these clips separately, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the replacement cross piece, which is going to be it's going to be a kit. It's going to come with everything. So I'm going to take this one out. Okay, after I removed the two clips, my first push was on here to break it free initially. You can tell because it gives you a nice big loud snap when it moves. And then once I did that, now I've actually repositioned so that I can push on this post right here and drive it out that way. Alright, here's what it looks like cleaned up. Got most of the grease off and cleaned out the holes there, and I'm going to get a small wire wheel tool for my Dremel. I had one but I broke it, and I'm going to use it to clean out that slot that the snap ring goes in, because there's a lot of rust in that slot, which is why those snap rings were so hard to get out. They were rusted in there. That's going to make reinstallation of the new snap rings easier if I clean up those slots. I'm going to gather up my parts to the old U-joint, head off to the auto parts store and see what I can find for a match. Well, went to Tractor Supply Company, and this is the closest I could come to what I had size-wise. This is a Weasler 200-3500, and the OD of the bearings here, bearing cups, is actually correct. The problem is length. The length on this one is just very slightly longer than this one. So hopefully I'll be able to get the snap rings to engage in the groove and hold that in there properly. And the only way I'm going to find out is to try it. I cleaned this up some, cleaned out those grooves, and now I'm going to try and install this in this yoke and see what happens. Well, much to my chagrin, this is not working out. I've got it fully seated on both sides. Well, not quite fully seated on that side, but I don't even have the groove exposed on this side, and I've got it only a half exposed on that side. So even if I fully compress this, I don't foresee being able to get both snap rings in there. So I'll give it one more little push and see if that's going to do it, but I don't think that's going to do it. I did get it in. It's just really tough because these it's tough to make sure that these go in perfectly straight. And if they cock a little bit, then what happens is then they don't want to engage properly on the post here. So it was hanging up just a little bit, but I noticed that. So I decided to give it a little extra force, and it made a loud pop and popped right down. What I did was I put one clip in on one side so that when I pushed it down, this clip was stopping it, and that kind of forced it in. And So now I know it's going to fit. I'm going to put that put it together on the other side of the yoke. All right, I've got that new cross bearing back together, so my universal joint is reassembled.